This is the best
Do you hear me?
of the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
K-Dub is up next in Alabama. How are you, K-Dub?
I'm doing good. I know good and well that didn't make the L. I know that had to hit the dump button. Did the dealer comment make the L there?
Did I miss something?
Oh, okay. Let me bag out of there. Let me bag all the way out, Beezy. The infamous list, man. The list. I'm just trying to get in the top 32. I just need to be in the first round. See, it don't matter if you go early. You just got to go to the right team, you know.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people don't understand.
I just need the right fit. So as long as I can get in the first round, I think I'll be okay, Beezy. I was looking and thinking yesterday, and this was before yesterday, Beezy. Do you realize that Nick Saban has more first-round draft picks than losses at Alabama? And this was before yesterday.
I didn't realize.
Did you realize that?
I have not been keeping up with Alabama's ratio between first-round picks and losses.
Man, that is amazing to me. I was really saying, I mean, you have to really just think about that, and like that is like if I'm sitting there as a high school kid and hear that stat and see those Alabama players walk across there, you know, that'll tell me something right there. Let me say this, Beasley. A year ago on this day, we had the tornado in Tuscaloosa, and I just wanted to come on and say I don't know if you remember that. I know I'm quite sure you remember that day. And I came on. I was on the show that day, and while it was going on, and I just wanted to reflect back on that.
Yeah,
day
let me explain something for a second. It was 2011 on this day, in about an hour or two. I know a lot of people have heard about it. It was probably the worst afternoon in the South's modern history in terms of tornadoes. They were literally everywhere in the South, from Mississippi, and they made their way through Alabama, Georgia, up the East Coast, to at least part of the East Coast. I mean, it was a devastating day. Tuscaloosa was probably the hardest hit, depending on where you were. It was an F4 and F5. What was interesting about this, and for those who have seen K-Dub, the 30 for 30 Roll Tide War Eagle, we were this show was in Birmingham at the time, and we were the centerpiece of that program. The story was told through the eyes of this show. It was a lot about the redemption of Alabama coming out of the ugly incident with Harvey Updike at the Tumors Trees. And what was particularly interesting about, as the Tuscaloosa literally went right through the heart of Tuscaloosa, the tornado went right through the heart of Tuscaloosa, right up the interstate toward Birmingham, and our studio was literally in the line. We saw it from our window, and everyone else. You probably heard me say this, Kato, before. That morning, the entire company was in this crisis mode. This is how we're going to deal with the storm in the event it happened. So the storm goes through Tuscaloosa, and I walked out during a break to see where our general manager was, because we needed some direction. We were on the air. People were listening to us. We needed to tell them. We're doing a sports show. Guess what? You've worked in corporate America. Everyone went home. We were the only ones left. And we decided to stay on the air. It was, you remember the crew. We had Kerry Adams, Pat Smith, a couple other people. And we went to a break, KW. You may have been listening, and the storm was racing up toward us, and you could see it on television. And I said, we're coming right back. And I added, I think. Yeah. I hope. Actually, I think I added, I hope. And we all ran outside for a second instead of taking shelter, and we literally saw the tornado pass within about a mile of us.
Yeah, I remember distinctly. I remember being on the show that day, and the temperament of the show, and the concern in your voice, and you hung in there with us, because, like you said, you was the only outlet that day. Everybody else went home.
Well, you know what happened, Kate? My wife had sent me a text. She had already everybody in the entire city had gone home. You knew the storm was coming. I mean, it was predicted. I mean, that morning the National Weather Service said this is potentially the worst tornado we've seen on record in 40 years or 30 years. So my wife sent me a text and said it's coming right towards you, and I misunderstood it. And I thought she said, you look at it in a panic. I thought it meant it's coming right toward me. You kind of get, and then I looked at it again. I realized it's coming right toward us. But the video from our studio was shown in that documentary, as you know. But it was a day. It was an eerie day, and it was a tragic day, and so much has been said about it. But it was really K-Dub, the 3 or 4 weeks in the aftermath that I think helped everyone, rebuild and rehabilitate. The next day, we literally had people calling the show, asking. They didn't know where their loved one was. We have never had a show like that in the history where people were calling saying, "Hey, I'm right outside Tuscaloosa and I'm okay. And I'm okay. I don't know where it was nothing like that had ever happened before. And I know you played a big role because you and a lot of your friends kept going into Tuscaloosa every day, I should say, and we're bringing a lot of aid, and we were down there a couple of times with you as well. But it was an extraordinary time. Yeah,
I definitely want to say we appreciate what the show did that day, and I'm the type of person, when something like that happened in other places, with like in Haiti or anywhere else, I always want to do something. But when it happened in Tuscaloosa, not only did I want to do something, I had to do something. So I appreciate what the show did as well. And if you don't mind, I know this is a radio and a TV no, but I want to do this a 2 or 3 moment of silence for everybody who lost their lives and everyone who went through something that day. If you don't mind, 1 moment of silence, please. Thank you, Bees, man. Appreciate it, man. Love you.
You got it.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
Daryl is up next. How are you, Daryl?
So how many do we have in the first round? 8 or 9? Something like that?
Yeah, something like that.
About twice as many as the Big Ten?
Easily.
Okay, yeah. I know Georgia had 3, Alabama had 4. I think Arkansas had 1. I thought Florida, South Carolina had 1 each. Maybe not.
Yeah, South Carolina. Yeah, that is correct. You are correct.
I usually am, Paul. I hear legends, hear legends all the time comparing Georgia to Buffalo Bills, but if you look like Bill Belichick, boy, he just loves them Bulldogs. We got him he's already got David Andrews. We got him another offensive lineman. Just loading up on Georgia big time. Speaking of legend, I want to piggyback off what he said the other day, because I agree 100%. This Hugh from Galp or whatever they call her, I've never even heard of him. And legend has never even heard of him. And if we ain't heard of him, that right there should
I agree with you, Daryl. Listen, I like him very much, but he's a periodic caller. He's mainly a basketball guy. We hear from him every 2 or 3 weeks. And, I will say this, they're my friends and my colleagues, but I don't know where Kubiak and John Hayes came up with these lists.
Of course you know where they come up with the list, Paul. It's obvious.
I'm not part of the consultation, I can assure you.
Okay,
well, my list would have the same.
Where's Kubiak from, Paul? What was his team?
From Rochester. By the way, my list, if I did a list of the top 10 callers, be the same guy 10 straight times.
Oh, speaking of which, everyone gives a hard time about beating Notre Dame last year, and they had 2 offensive linemen going in the top 10. But isn't he a Notre Dame guy? You remember when Notre Dame used to dominate football and had their own little TV station?
I'm sure.
And they're not anymore, Paul. They're not anymore. You know why? Because of Alabama and because of the SEC, okay? That's why. And you saw what Georgia did. We went up there and packed the house, put more people in their friggin' stadium than they could put in there. And he's hell-bent over that. That's why. You know what I don't understand? I know that ESPN was bought out by Disney. But, it's like your producers are like friggin' Goofy and Mickey Mouse. How did they put...
Well, hold on. What about the guys that are there today, Randy and John?
I don't know. I'm talking about John. I don't know Randy that well. I'm talking about John and Kubiak. All right, those are 2.
John, do you have anything to say?
As long as I'm Mickey Mouse, I'm fine. I'm not Goofy, right?
John, go take a shower.
Daryl's throwing stones today.
But no, I ain't throwing stones. I'm just telling you, it makes no sense why the SEC network would have some guys from that's up north in the Big Ten and pulls for Notre Dame. No, you're hating on the SEC. Yeah, I'm sure you got SEC fatigue. That's understandable.
Well, Daryl, allow me. Hold on a second. Hey, Daryl, allow me to explain, since I had a pretty big role in the hiring of both John and Kubiak.
Well, why didn't you hire Pat Smith instead?
Well, Pat Smith was hired instead initially, but he chose to stay in Birmingham.
I think you're too close to it, Paul. That's the problem. I'm on the outside looking in. Tell me how you got 2 Big Ten guys making your top 10 list that rarely call the show.
Whoa. Notre Dame's not in the Big Ten, Daryl. No, don't you dare associate Notre Dame with the Big Ten. You got that, pal?
Kubiak's going to sit there and talk about,
Daryl, what you don't understand, Daryl, these guys were never, when they were hired, they were not. We never expected them.
I don't think they got you in the best interest. I don't think they got you in the best interest. You know why? Here's the problem: they lack vision and they lack creativity. You know what the show is? It's becoming like you're.
Daryl, you lack brains. That's Daryl. You lack a brain.
Washington Wizards, okay? You are the senior league in golf.
Daryl, let me ask you a question because
Daryl. The top 3 callers.
Daryl, may I ask you a question?
Sure.
We're coming to the end. Daryl, listen to me for a second. We're coming to the end of a tenure here, and we'll reset here in a couple of weeks. So, are you suggesting I should replace both of them and bring other people on the show?
I would like put them up for free agency. You know what I mean? We can get a bat and a couple balls for them or something, right? I'm sure we can get some out of them. You know what?
Hey, Daryl, there may be a total reset here in about 2 months. Okay.
Paul, they lack vision. Let me tell you why. You know how I know that? Look at the top 3, the 2 callers. They ain't top 3. They're all in their 60s, Paul. You know that right there. That should tell you all that you need to know. They're all over 60 years. The top 3 callers John had are all over 60 years.
That's not true.
This is. Hold on, is it? Howard Rich.
So, Daryl, let me get this straight, Daryl. You are basing the quality of the producers on the show because of a mock draft that was created?
That you have.
That's what's going on right now?
Lack of vision. And you know what, Daryl? That's why. You know what, Daryl? Think about it this way. It's why you weren't in the top 10. You really lack vision out on the field. You have a hard time.
You're in the pocket. You're in a tunnel.
You know, when you drop back in the pocket, Daryl, you want to make sure that you can see the field. You're really lacking vision. That outside wide receiver.
You're staring down to receivers. It's not working in our system.
That's right.
You need to bring in some young callers, man. You can't live off the old guys. Old guys are washed up. You know,
Daryl, do you ever stop? Allow me to ask you a question, okay?
Sure.
If I brought you on as a consultant, I know you have a job. I'm not trying to hire you away from whatever you do. And asked you to reshape this program, because I think it's time. I agree. We came here for 5 years. 5 years. We've been here 5 years. So we're about to start a new chapter here in a couple of months. How would you redesign the program?
Well, first thing I would remind you of what you said and what was said in the ESPN Roll Tide War Eagle, which you got those that listen to the Finebaum show and those that do it but don't admit it, right? Well, guess what? Those that do that don't admit it, they really are haters, okay?
No, the line was there are those who listen to the Finebaum show, and then there are the liars.
Jim from Crestwood was a hater. He was, but you know what? He's the best caller you ever had.
But he won't call in anymore, Daryl. I can't do anything about a guy that won't call.
But you can't say, I don't, Jim, because all he does is hate on the show. That's why I don't like it. That's bull. You know what? You got haters out there, Paul, that listen just to hear hate on the show. They love that. They thrive off that. That's why they listen. That's what you fail to see. I mean, you got to see. I done told you, okay? You need to put the pro back into the producer.
Daryl, okay, so Hayes is out, right?
I thought you said Hayes was out anyway. Wasn't he leaving and going somewhere?
Cut the fat.
I mean, Hayes may be out. By the way, Daryl, none of us know whether we'll be here anyway. Okay, I mean,
what has Hayes? You're already here. You're there. What has Hayes done? What's Hayes' criticism? What's his resume?
John,
what has he done in the past?
John.
Am I on a job interview right now?
John, I'd rather not do this over the air, but
we can do it if you want.
John,
let's do it.
We appreciate everything you've done. We wish you all your future endeavors.
I'm going to sue your ass.
This is uncomfortable.
Randy, I don't have as much direct control over you.
Yeah, am I still in, Paul, or am I?
You're good for the you're good for the rest of the show.
Okay.
They cannot relate to the South. That's the problem. Okay. And
apparently, Daryl wants John out. Randy, you're okay for now.
Okay, thank you.
They cannot relate to people in the South. Okay, they cannot. They're SEC fatigue. They hate on the SEC. You know they do. I mean, look at how the.
I'd like to introduce Jamari Jordan. He's the newest member of the Paul Finebaum Show staff.
I am a graduate of the University of Georgia, so
yes.
Daryl, we can have a conversation.
Good job, Daryl. You've gotten your wish.
Okay, well, that guy right there needs to be your producer. Okay, now we're moving on.
Good job, Daryl. Let's cut that off.
Okay, we're back. We're going to be back after this timeout, and everybody take a shower and calm down. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
It was BYOG, bring your own guts.
This is the best
Do you hear me?
of the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
Welcome back to our program. Let's talk to the aforementioned George Schroeder. George, we read your piece. Sounds like you could have done that one from home. Good afternoon.
Don't tell my bosses that, but yeah, absolutely, you're right. Definitely could have. Listen, when Jim Delaney doesn't show up, and of course the Big Ten commissioners who I'm talking about, for the annual meeting, it's a pretty good indication that there's not going to be anything happening at the annual meeting.
By the way, I don't mean to be. I mean, was it anything specific? I mean, was he sick? Did he have a reason, or he just decided it wasn't worth the effort?
Literally vacationing is my understanding. You know, the Big Ten has its meeting out in Phoenix next week, along with a lot of other conferences that have their annual meetings. And so I think he just decided there's nothing really on the playoff annual meeting agenda. I'm going to go ahead and catch a vacation while I can.
Oh, wow.
It's my understanding he's somewhere abroad. Not with the Michigan football team, by the way, but somewhere abroad. But I couldn't quite pin it down and didn't think it was worth gumshoeing to get.
Well, so I guess I know these are standard meetings, and you have them whether there's anything to talk about or not. But I mean, do you think they did this just to reinforce the idea that we like what we're doing, and secondly, we really didn't care one bit about UCF?
Well, they really don't care one bit about UCF, and I don't think they're offended by all the claiming of the national title. But I don't think it matters to them much. Look, there is a trophy and a system that's set up now to award a national title, and it's no longer a poll-driven sort of type of thing. And I think everybody who's not UCF recognizes Alabama as having won the national championship. So I don't think that's really a blip. I thought it was interesting. Bill Hancock, in the way only he can say it, said something to the effect of, I don't begrudge them their joyful exuberance. Right. Or something to that effect. I mean, that's a nice way to say it, but it sort of also says that's all it is.
But because you were there as well. I mean, there was a lot of impatient people connected to the college football playoff. Not so much about UCF, but the fact. I mean, some of the language UCF was using around the time of the national championship game. Yeah,
that's right. Look, I mean, it's nice that you finished unbeaten and everything else, and it was obviously a big win to beat Auburn in the Peach Bowl. And Auburn, by the way, beat both of the teams that played for the national title, as we both know. And so, look, it was a terrific season. But when I look at the four teams in the playoff, no offense, and look, I know the UCF fans will be mad at me, but which of those four teams should not have been in the playoff for UCF? And I don't have an answer for you because the answer is none. All four of those teams were better than UCF.
Oh, absolutely.
So, yeah, you're right. There were some people impatient. I think, and look, it's kind of funny. Every day it seems like there's something new. There's a campus police car with, the national title, stuff wrapped around it and stuff like that. And it's like, at what point are you going to be done with it? And I don't know what the answer is, but they're not done with it yet.
I don't mind the school and the students having fun with it. I think the thing that bothers me the most, and I don't want to call out Mike Bianchi because we've been friends for 25 years, but the fact that you have media members down there propagating absolute falsehoods. And that's probably the only thing that I think is wrong. I mean, Scott Frost is gone. Heupel's there. These are college students. Let them have their moment. But for grown-ups to participate in this in this absolute fraudulent deception, that's where I draw the line.
With the administration getting on board and having fun with it too. But I don't disagree with you. When you talk about sort of the local media jumping on board as though that's what's going on, that's a little much in my mind. Look, if I had a connection with UCF somehow, if I'd gone to school there, or if I lived in Orlando, I'd probably own one of the T-shirts that I'm sure they have.
Of course.
But
I did. By the way, I did order the UCF National Championship book. It's coming any day, so giving it out to all my friends for Christmas. Hey, by the way, George, I don't want you to go before. I think you still live in Oklahoma, don't you?
I do.
Okay. The reason I bring that up is pretty obvious. You have spent a lot of time around that program and a lot of time around Baker Mayfield. So I want to go take you to take us through your reaction last night. Everyone was projecting him to go first, but it still surprised pretty much the entire world.
Well, first of all, it's a stunning story if you just take a step back and think about it. I mean, the kid walked on at Texas Tech because he didn't have very many, actual FBS scholarship offers. Then he becomes the first walk-on to start in his first game as a true freshman at an FBS, at a major college program, when he does that at Tech, largely because of injuries during the August practices. Then he walks on at Oklahoma and wins the job. And then next thing you know, he's a Heisman Trophy winner. And now he's the number one pick in the draft. I mean, it's an amazing story. And I've got to tell you, even maybe this time a year ago, when we knew he was a really, really good college quarterback, I still wasn't sure maybe what I thought about his pro prospects. I had warmed to the idea that he was going to play NFL football, and I thought he would be better than everybody thought. What I didn't think was everybody would think he's worth the number one pick. I mean, that is still stunning to me. I think he'll be a really good pro quarterback. But when that sort of started to come out in the last day and a half or 2 days, that not only is he going to be a top 10 pick, he's going to be the number one pick. I got to be honest with you, it's still flabbergasting.
George, you watch a lot of the comings and goings in relation to off the field, and the even though he doesn't like it, and a lot of people close to him don't, the Manziel comparisons. What's your objective view from there on Baker Mayfield off the field?
Well, look, I mean, we talk about the Manziel comparisons in large part because of the videotaped scene of him running from the cops in Fayetteville, Arkansas. And look, that's legit. You do that, you get what comes. And then obviously the obscene gestures and the things he yelled across the field at Kansas last November. And when you do that kind of stuff and you lose control, people are going to say those kinds of things. What I think is a little bit different is in the locker room and first of all, I don't think he's nearly as maybe out of control as I think Johnny Manziel was in those kinds of things we were just talking about. Like, I don't think he's out drinking and partying all the time. But once you get inside the locker room, I don't know that, and I'm sure there are these guys out there, but I don't know that I've ever been around fairly closely a guy who everybody says galvanizes his teammates better than Baker Mayfield does. I know there's that guy kind of on every team, but to that extent, I don't know that I've seen that. And so I think that's a big difference. I think he was, once you got certainly inside the locker room, in the weight room, in the auspices of the program, I think you had a guy who was buttoned down and was the prototypical quarterback who, works harder, studies longer, all those kinds of things you're supposed to hear about a quarterback. And I'm not sure that that's whatever Johnny Manziel's reputation was at A&M.
Great stuff, as always, from George Schroeder from USA Today. George, appreciate it. I hope you aren't too worn out from covering the college football playoff meetings. Relax and rest this weekend.
A lot of sitting around and then nothing happening. But that's how it goes.
Good stuff. George.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
And we welcome you back, and we're heading out to Dallas, where Chris Canty is right now. He's part of ESPN Radio's coverage of the draft, also former Giants Super Bowl star and a mainstay on ESPN New York every afternoon. It's been a while, Chris. Thanks for the time, and good afternoon. How are you?
I'm great, Paul. How are you doing?
We are doing really well. Let's talk about the draft. Certainly, you're out there and able to sense it and understand it in real time. But having said all that, what was the reaction among your colleagues and among yourself when it was Baker Mayfield last night?
I think we were all a little bit surprised that Baker went number one overall. the thought process is that teams at the top of the draft want to mitigate risk. And when you think about quarterbacks of Baker's stature, not a lot of them have had success in the National Football League. A lot of people want to point to Russell Wilson or Drew Brees. He doesn't have the athleticism as Russell Wilson has, and I don't know that he's capable of being able to manipulate the pocket and be as cerebral as Drew Brees is. So Baker Mayfield has a tough road ahead of him in terms of being able to live up to being drafted number 1 overall, especially with the other 3 quarterbacks that win the top 10.
Yeah, and I want to get to the other ones in a second, but if you're sitting there in the war room of the Browns and you've made so many bad decisions in the past, wouldn't there have been a safer choice or a better choice, considering you also had 4?
Yeah, I think people would look at it and say, well, Saquon Barkley was the best player in this draft, and he was probably the one that comes with the least amount of risk, and he addresses a position of need for the Browns. They can't have enough playmakers on the offensive side of the ball. I know they signed Carlos Hyde and they've got Duke Johnson, but Saquon Barkley, from an athleticism standpoint, is on a whole nother level. And then you look at Quentin Nelson or Bradley Chubb. I think those are the guys that we all would point to and say could be cornerstone players and don't come with as much risk as a player like Baker Mayfield. You can't think about, Baker Mayfield being a safe prospect. He's a risk, both in terms of production on the field and character off of it. So I question the move, but John Dorsey is a football guy. He has a track record of being able to find good quarterbacks. He was a part of the regime that drafted Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay. So, maybe he sees something that translates to success for Baker Mayfield in the NFL. I just don't see it.
It's always interesting when someone sees something that no one else does, and sometimes that's right, and most of the time it's not. Chris Canty joining us. Let's talk about some of the players that we're pretty familiar with on this program. You and I have talked about it all fall about various players, but Roquan Smith, Minkah Fitzpatrick, just to name 2, they went pretty much in short order early in the first round. Your assessment of both of those young men?
Well, listen, I love Roquan Smith, what he brings to the table. I think pairing him with Danny Trevathan inside in Chicago's 3-4 defense is going to be huge. He's going to be allowed to do what he does best, which is run and hit. When you think about that defensive front 7 that they're trying to build, they had Leonard Floyd a couple of years ago. They added into that defense as a pass rusher, and now adding Roquan Smith. Again, Vic Fangio getting another playmaker on that defense, so I think that's going to be big for the Chicago Bears. And
how do you see Minkah fitting in?
Well, Minkah Fitzpatrick, I think, has the ball skills to be a deep middle-of-the-field safety, but he also has the versatility to be able to come down and cover slot receivers. I'm not sure that I think he's got the wiggle to be an outside man-to-man cover corner in the National Football League. I don't think he has that burst. But in terms of being a chess piece on the defense that you can move around in a lot of different places and cause some confusion in terms of the looks that you can present to the offense and sub packages, I think he's the perfect fit for that Miami Dolphins defense.
Overall, 10 players from the SEC taken in the first round. Talking to Chris Canty, the former Giants player on the Super Bowl. Let me ask you about your team. And I know a lot of people in New York are happy today about Saquon Barkley, but many others have wondered, what about a quarterback? Eli Manning, as you well know, you talk about it every day, is certainly late. Some people think beyond late in his career.
Yeah, he's definitely on the back nine. As somebody said, he's teeing it up on the 17th hole. I just don't know how long Eli can do it. My former teammate, I have all the confidence in the world in him, but I wanted to attribute his lack of production to poor offensive line play over the last couple of years. But Dave Gettleman is getting rid of that excuse. He brought in Nate Solder and Patrick Omameh in free agency. They've got Brett Jones at center. He's probably going to be active in trying to address the offensive line today, day 2 of the draft. So that excuse looks like it's going away. So now that you've added another playmaker in Saquon Barkley to go along with Evan Ingram out of Ole Miss and then Sterling Shepard and Odell Beckham Jr., there's no excuse for that offense not to be explosive this year. So the addition of Saquon Barkley changes the expectations for the New York Giants. They're trying to compete for a championship while they still have Eli Manning under contract in 2019. But in the landscape of the NFC, I don't know if they have enough.
I want to ask you about the running back position. We've seen it be successful in Dallas. We saw Fournette last year have a big year. But a lot of the new thinking is that it's it's a risk too, even though Saquon Barkley, as you and everyone else have said, was probably the best player in the draft. How do you debate a running back in that spot versus a quarterback?
Well, here's the thing. You know that if you add the running back, you're trying to compete now because you're not going to get top-end production at the running back position for more than 5 or 6 seasons. So Saquon Barkley is going to be a day-one starter in that backfield. You have to think that the Giants are trying to compete right now. And the problem comes along with that is that you have an aging quarterback back, and at some point you're going to have to find the successor for Eli Manning. Now, if all goes according to plan, you don't plan on being at the top of the draft anytime soon. So I guess my question would be, if you find franchise quarterbacks at the top of the draft, but you don't plan on drafting there anytime soon because you're trying to be competitive, when do you find the quarterback for Eli Manning?
Pretty fair question. I realize most of the action is on the first night, but there's still some pretty quality players out there. Darius Geis, just among others. I mean, what do you sense first of all about him? And what do you see tonight? What are going to be some of the bigger stories?
You know, I love Darius Geis and his ability in between the tackles. I think he's patient enough behind his blockers. He uses the space that they create for him very well. He's a runner that understands the value of a 4-yard run, and that's a skill set that translates to success on early downs in the NFL. It's one of those situations where he's not always looking to bounce it to the edge of the defense because you realize that space closes down very quickly. He's a north-south, no-nonsense type of runner, and I really love his game. I think he's going to be a steal in day 2. I'd be surprised if he didn't go in the top half of the second round.
Chris, I know you got a lot to do. We appreciate your time today. It's always great to catch up.
Thanks for having me on, Paul.
You got it. Chris Canty joining us, ESPN New York. He'll be part of the ESPN coverage tonight, former Giant. We are up against a break. More of your phone calls at 855-242-7285. Tim Brando in the final hour this evening. We're coming right back.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
It was BYOG, bring your own guts.
This is the best
Do you hear me?
of the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
We welcome all of you back. Glad you're here, and let's continue with more phone calls. And what about Ken in Virginia? Welcome to our program. Good afternoon.
Hey, Paul. Calling about the Browns and
Sure.
realizing whenever I watch the draft, I just thank God I'm not a Browns fan. I can't imagine what they did picking Mayfield. When you're drafting, you have to bear in mind what the other teams are thinking. And if other teams didn't have him as the number 1 pick, why are you taking him as number 1, especially when you have the number 4 pick? They could have drafted Saquon Barkley, a no-miss running back, and then probably had Mayfield at 4. And if not,
Yeah,
Mayfield,
common sense, not often used in NFL, but common sense was Saquon Barkley was the number 1 pick. No matter if you do that, you're going to get a great quarterback, and you're almost automatically going to get Baker Mayfield too.
Right, and that would have essentially meant basically getting 2 number 1 picks in your mind.
Yeah,
and that would have been
on top of the one last year
for them.
Yeah.
I
don't understand it. I'll never understand it. But then again, I'm not the owner of an NFL franchise. I'm just a poor guy who takes phone calls every day. Thanks for the call. Appreciate it. Makes no sense. But again, we're talking about the NFL draft. Steve is in West Virginia. Hello, Steve.
Hey, Paul. How are you?
Very well. Good to have you on board.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to start off with saying I'm a Bengals fan. So I am happy as hell the Browns don't know what the hell they're doing when they draft. So I've said all along that you have to take Saquon Barkley number 1, and you have to take Mika Fitzpatrick as number 4. And they as an organization, they just don't get it.
Well, I mean, again, they did win how many games last year? None?
No. 1 or none.
No, they didn't win any.
Right. But if you're going to take a quarterback, in my opinion, if you're going to take a quarterback and you play in that terrible weather You have to take a quarterback who played in terrible weather, which was Josh Allen.
Yeah. Well, by the way, I mean, there's some speculation that maybe Baker would have gone earlier, but you still have Josh Allen. You still have Josh Rosen. You're going to get you'll have at least 2 quarterbacks available.
Right, and Buffalo has to be ecstatic today. They got a cold weather kid to play, and I like I said, being a Bengals fan, I'm glad they don't have a clue of what they're doing. But the NFL, it's like the NFL is like college football. When the Cowboys, the Browns, the Steelers, and those teams are good, it's good for the NFL. And the Browns management just cannot get it right.
Thank you very much Thanks for the call. Charles is up next in Mississippi. Charles, welcome to the show.
Good day to you, Paul.
Thank you.
Look, I want to talk about Jalen a little bit. I've watched every game he's played, but you got to remember, Jalen had a great defense behind him, so he didn't have to pass very much because the defense, the first year, they were scoring all the points. So, to me, now we got a quarterback that can throw the ball. So, I wish Jalen just go ahead and be man up about it and hang around this year, and he don't want to stay after this year.
Well, hold on a second. What's he supposed to man up about?
Well, if he doesn't get to be number one, that's just the way it is. That's football.
But, if he doesn't get to be number one, then he's going to leave.
Well, I'm saying, he would be better off to stay this year.
Hold on a second, Charles. Why would he be better off to stay? Because you want him to stay?
Well, he's not going to be able to play if he goes.
Well, he may not play if he stays.
Huh?
Well, I mean, here's what it comes down to. He can play he can stick around Alabama where he may be the number 2 quarterback. He may be the number 3 quarterback. I don't know.
I don't know either.
And then he can be a graduate transfer and go play, or he can leave now and have 2 years of eligibility left. It's a simple choice.
Yeah, I mean, it's up to him, and he's been a good quarterback, but like I said,
I'm not sure. I'll tell you one thing. If Jalen Hurts listens to this program, he's probably calling an Uber right now to go to the airport. Let's check in with Larry next. Larry, would you take him to the airport?
Who, that guy? Who take you to the airport?
Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, man, you got that right. Oh my God, I let him ride on my back, Jack. I drive.
Hey, Larry, I've got to interrupt this for a second because I've spoken to you. How long have we been friends?
Man, 100 years.
I don't know, but Larry, I guess what I'm trying. 5 years, 10 years. What would you say?
Yeah, 15.
15 years.
Yeah.
In those 15 years, we've had some interesting conversations. You know where I'm going.
Temple.
I don't know if I've ever heard you this drunk.
Well, I'm over at Rich's in Atlanta. That's why he got me drunk. That's why.
I mean, usually I can understand every third or fourth word. Today, I'm waiting for the UN interpreter to tell me what in the world you're talking about.
I know, he got me drunk. We're playing that Terry Goon golf tournament tomorrow, and he got me toasted. And that's why I don't know. You know what I mean? I don't know. He knows how to push my buttons and get me toasted, Jack. But I'm happy.
Larry, just for the record, can you give us a count, a beer count?
About 18, somewhere around there. I mean, he's been.
Are these normal or tall boys?
Just normal. Here's
what's a normal? 12 ounce?
12 ounces.
So 18.
Yeah,
do the math for me. 18 times 12 ounces.
Yeah.
What's that? Anybody know?
Yeah, a lot.
A lot.
Yeah, a lot. I'm saving swagoo to can. But check it out, man. I'm glad. How does my world get turned upside down one day? I'm number one now and ain't on the list.
We figured out you have consumed 216 ounces of beer today.
That's right, Jack. I ain't through.
Hey, Larry. Before you go,
Yeah.
you want to try some spelling words?
Yeah, I'll try. I can spell better drunk than I could sober. Go ahead. Try one. I heard it.
I mean, you've misspelled Utah. You've misspelled amnesty. You've misspelled Smirkly.
I'm not going to argue with that.
I bet you know how to spell Budweiser.
Yeah.
You can't look at the bottle.
BTL, Bud Light, but BUDWEISWER. Bam. Woo! I got that right, Jack.
Guys in the booth, are you keeping up with all this?
No, because we're really confused.
I think he got it wrong.
He had to have got it wrong.
I'm pretty sure there's a W at the end of there, at the end of Budweiser. Right? There is no Budweiser.
It's not Budweiser.
BUDWEISER.
Well, that's not fair, Larry. You got
there. You go.
Ding, 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 ding.
Larry, that's not fair because you have 18 bottles next to you to look at.
Listen. I'm not looking at nothing. I know what I'm spelling. Let's see here. Bud, BUDLIGHT. Hey, I know one thing. Big Ten John can't spell it. Where's he at? Hello?
Where's that boy at?
Where's Big Ten? Spell it, Big Ten. I wish
Spell
he was
what?
here with me.
BIGTEN.
I wish he was here with me, boy. Hey, we'll be rocking, Jack.
Paul, I'm going to have to agree with you here. Larry is 3 sheets to the wind.
Yeah, no, this is. I don't listen. First of all, we don't encourage this.
I know, but I'm at home. I'm in a safe
I've never
place.
heard you this. What would be a good
Toasted.
word? Inebriated.
Toasted.
Okay, here's Larry. Here's the word. Repeat after me.
All right.
Inebriated.
ANEBERNATERAT. Inebriated. ED. Inebriated. I got it.
No, Larry. The word is inebriated. I think you know what it means, don't you?
No.
It means
sounds like something you do to a horse. Inebriate him.
No. Inebriated is something you do before you call us. Was that a good clue?
Whoa. I don't know about
inebriated.
that.
I looked it up, and inebriated has your picture next to it.
One
more time, Larry, because we're up against a break.
No,
Larry, one more time. Inebriated.
Inebriated, Jack. How about that?
Larry, be careful when you say the phrase ED.
ED. Oh. Is there something wrong with that?
Well, it could be a result of 18 beers.
Oh, okay. Well, it's Rich's fault. It ain't mine. I just come here just being a participant.
Okay, Larry. We are going to send you on your way because we just we have to hit this.
I'm going to win the golf tournament tomorrow, Jack. Kerry Good, Atlanta, Georgia. Talk about I'll be number one back on that list, won't I?
Thank you, Larry.
Man, okay.
Have yourself a merry little weekend. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
We welcome you back. Final hour of the day and of the week, and who better to bring on to help us get to the finish line than Tim Brando, the outstanding play-by-play broadcaster for Fox, who I imagine did a lot of Big 12 games this year and was thinking about Baker Mayfield like the rest of us last night. Tim, good afternoon, first of all.
Great to be with you, Paul, if you got 15 to 20 minutes to fill on a Friday, I guess I'm as good a candidate as any. Good to be with you.
We tried Danny Sheridan, but 8 months later, after dealing with all the people, we finally gave up.
I'm happy, and I'm also cheap. So let's get on with it. It's good to be with you.
Yeah, I knew we were in trouble with Sheridan when the last contact said you need to call my guy Michael Cohen, and. So okay, let's start with Baker Mayfield. I mean, you've seen this guy, you know him, you've been around him, you've done games. Help us understand what a lot of the experts did not see happening.
I think you're wrong about him. You're not as wrong as, say, Colin Cowherd is wrong, but you're wrong. All right, I don't have a problem with his not being number one. I think I would have taken Darnold over him. Even though Sam had a tough senior year, a lot of the problems that Sam Darnold had, Paul, were driven by a poor offensive line,
right?
That was decimated by the time they got to the Notre Dame game, and they were on, I think, their sixth different starting lineup in the front line when I got them in Colorado, and they went on obviously to win the Pac-12, a weak Pac-12, but they went on to win it. I think Sam took a lot of chances when he shouldn't have. And I think even though Ronald Jones is a great back, they didn't utilize their run game as much because of the porous offensive line they had. Therefore, he was in a lot of second and third and longs, and I think that's where a lot of those turnovers happen. Now, he's got to protect the ball better when he's scrambling around, and he is a great athlete. For Baker Mayfield, I just think that a lot's been made of his issues because of who he is. And listen, it's a bad look anytime you turn on YouTube and you see a guy running from the Fayetteville police. That's bad. I mean, there's no denying that. But you could Google a lot of different people that you and I know and like and see bad things about them the moment you Google them. Okay, it happens to a lot of people. Many times when they're young, sometimes when they're out of college, sometimes when they're in college. Baker made obviously some mistakes, but I think in terms of leadership, core values of leadership, I think he's got it in spades. And I think that's one of the reasons why, as a walk-on, he was able to secure the position away from a player that I think everyone thought was going to be a pro in front of him after he transferred from Texas Tech. And obviously that led the kid from Oklahoma to A&M, who was also a really good quarterback. So I think what it takes for him to be successful is that edge. And he's got that. He plays with that. Unfortunately, I think from time to time it has spilled over off the field. And when you do have those mistakes made in today's environment, everybody's going to see them. Comes with the territory of being a quarterback at a big-time college. But one of the reasons why I think the Browns looked away from it and a lot of other NFL teams looked away from it is because during the interview process, he did an excellent job. I think if Baker's guilty of anything now, it's that he's got rabbit ears with regard to criticism, whether it's from Colin or you or anybody else that's in the business of doing talk radio on a daily basis and has 3 or 4 hours to fill. You know, he needs to stop worrying about that because I don't think you ever met him, and I'm pretty sure Colin's not met him because you haven't had to prepare for football games as I have, and I guess Herb Street last night is a good example of that. You know, Kirk knows the kid is a pretty solid individual most of the time. He's had just a few bad moments, and those bad moments for him are well documented, more so than most.
Beyond that, it was an interesting array, as the NFL draft always is.
Yeah.
By the way, did you ever do that when you were at ESPN?
No, and I stayed away from it like the plague. I wanted no part of it. The only day worse to me than and listen, I watch it and I love watching it. In fact, a little bit like you remember when we were kids, Paul, because you and I are the same age essentially. When the Republican and Democratic national conventions were on, how we would turn the channel from NBC to see what Sander Van Oker had versus what Rather had on the floor in Chicago or what Frank Reynolds and Howard K. Smith had on ABC. I mean, I'm a TV-aholic in terms of trying to see who's going to have the most entertaining show. And frankly, I would call last night a dead heat. I think the NFL Network and Fox simulcast was really good in a lot of spots, and I certainly thought ESPN with Herbie and Gruden's chair was outstanding. And I loved the idea of having the college game day guys having their own version of it. I thought that was a real cool thing because a lot of times all the people that are talking about these future NFL players, they've been to the combine and they've been to the pro days, but they haven't seen the guys lacing it up and playing in real games. So I think a lot of times the college guys have, I feel like I've got a viewpoint on some of these players that others don't, just in terms of when they're, playing with live bullets, in real game situations. So I like watching it, but I want no part of covering it. It's a lot of work, and it's a grab bag. I mean, you can be really right and really wrong within the 2 minutes time, and that's whether you're someone as gifted as Mel Kiper or Mike Mayock. And they do it for a living. This is what they do, all year round. So as a broadcaster, I never wanted to have anything to do with it. When I covered the Saints in New Orleans, local radio, 1981 and 82, we did it from the Monteleone. Remember those days, ESPN had it on in the mornings on a weekday. And it was like, just like signing day, it was a reason to get drunk and get out of work day, So fans came down to the French Quarter and went berserk over George Rogers being the number one pick, and that was fun to cover locally. But nationally, I would never want to have to put the time in for an event that is over just like that.
Talking to Tim Brando, Tim, I realize you go through Tuscaloosa occasionally, but I have to ask you about this never-ending, at least for now, controversy on this program and others about Jalen Hurts versus Tua. You know what these two are capable of, and maybe just frame it for us, especially as someone who did for many, many years and did it as well as anyone who's ever done it, a program like this.
Listen, there is no getting around the fact that fans are going to always gravitate towards, the mission-critical position in football of who's going to be the starting quarterback. That's always going to be the case. And dating all the way back to the first black quarterback LSU had, Carl Otis Trimble, what I believe was right out of high school and going into college for me back in the day, is the uniqueness of – and to some extent sadness of why people form the opinions they form is just part of our culture, Paul. It is. And I think in the case of Jalen Hurts, what you have is a playmaking, dual-purpose quarterback who was never meant to check down to his third option in the passing game. So that's why he's been effective, because the offense was built around him to do that. Now, that is in sharp contrast to what, for instance, McCarron was doing when he was there. With Tua, this kid's got the capability now of being the prolific pocket passer, but he can maneuver. He can do essentially both. He proved that, I thought, on 2nd and 26 to some extent after he was sacked on the first play of overtime. So I don't think there's any doubt. Nick can use this to have fun with the local media and to some extent the national media, but in the end, Tua is going to be the quarterback of this team, in my opinion. And there will be times when Jalen can run his stuff. They can run special stuff for him. And I think ultimately it's going to be in his best interest. I've heard that the father has said a few things, so he's getting involved in it. But why would he leave now after what he's done? And his legacy, certainly within the program, is strong enough that he would, in my estimation, want to stay through this season. But if he's done and has a chance to be a grad transfer, I would agree with his dad. I think he's going to be one hot free agent coming out for an additional year after this season. That's the thing that I see happening here.
Yeah, I did too, but again, sometimes it's hard to differentiate reality from all the noise, and there's plenty of noise on this. Another subject that we haven't talked a lot about, but I'm getting really weird vibes, and I ask you because you live there, you live in the state, you lived in Baton Rouge, you know the situation, but the expectations at LSU seem to be all over the map. You don't get a great feeling coming out of camp. I realize you're not intimate in terms of that program anymore, but you hear a lot about it.
Well, I do know that they're a lot better in their offensive front and their defensive front. And, you're not going to hear a lot about that because it's the offense. As Keith Jackson used to say, Paul, the big uglies. They never talk about them, but you sure do need them. And they didn't have enough of them last year. And I think it was the problem that they had in the Alabama game, the problem they had in several other key games where physically they weren't superior, okay? It didn't show up against teams that they were superior than physically, but when they were matched up against teams that were as or more physical, the lack of offensive line strength, they were really young, particularly up front. I thought the quarterback, actually, Ettlinger, was serviceable when he was protected. He wasn't protected particularly well. I think this year they're going to be much better protected, which for whoever it is at quarterback, okay, and that's the issue. Who will it be? I think he'll be better protected, therefore has a chance to be more successful in the passing game. You've lost Geis. We don't know who the next one of those great running backs from LSU will be. I'll guarantee you they're going to have a 1,000-yard rusher, though, with the offense that Steve Ensminger is going to run. And the other overblown part of all of this is the sort of substance over style decision that was made by Orgeron that I frankly agree with. He wanted Steve Ensminger to be his guy all along. Matt Canada was sort of forced on him by those above him, if you get my drift.
I can't believe that happens to Tim.
Yeah, I think
at LSU? What are you talking about?
I think the chain of command politically can be difficult at times. Yeah, and I'll stop there. I thought they felt like they needed to have a guy like Canada on their staff that, quote-unquote, the football world thought was the next great guru. And Ed was never comfortable with the hire, but they had this money to spend, and he said that he would do this, and it helped him get the job. So he kind of had to do it to be the guy that was no longer interim but full-time head coach. Steve Ensminger is a bright mind, and years ago, he's in his late 50s now. He was a 50-50 starter in 1979, which was my first year in Baton Rouge. He and David Woodley, who went on to play for the Miami Dolphins, were the two quarterbacks in 1979, McClendon's last year. Steve knows offensive football. In fact, wants to spread it out a lot more than Canada did. And I think that this is going to be probably the most surprising aspect of the season will be that Steve Ensminger actually will have a more high-flying, high-octane offensive approach than even Matt Canada had. And if they can get the quarterback play that they need, and I'm not sure, that's the big question. Will they get the quarterback play that they need? I don't know that Steve is necessarily a quarterback whisperer, but I mean, they haven't had that really since Jimbo Fisher was there working for Nick. But if they can get really just good quarterback play, I think with this offense and with a new and improved older offensive line, LSU's got a chance to squeeze maybe 9 or 10 wins out. And if they do that, then I think it's mission accomplished for Orgeron.
Yeah, I mean, by the way, you have just laid out the most positive approach to LSU I've heard, and it's interesting, and you did it very substantively, because I think there's a tendency, myself included, just to write Ensminger off.
Yeah, well, he's not the rock star. See, everyone wants, the rock star, like Sark. If it's not Sark, then it's Kiffin. If it's not Kiffin, then it's, and to Nick's credit, he sort of, I think, set the narrative in college football for this to be the case. But there have always been, before, when Steve became an assistant coach, Paul, we go back 20, 25, 30 years. Do you remember when I was on your show in Birmingham?
Oh, yeah.
Back when Curry was at Alabama. Do you think really anybody knew who the OC and the DCs were back in 1988?
No.
They didn't. No. I'll give you a great example of a guy that was a hell of a coach that bounced around and probably would have been worth $3 million now. Remember the name Lynn Amity?
I sure do.
Lynn was at Clemson. He was at A&M. He was at Texas.
Oh yeah.
He was a quarterback at LSU, a backup quarterback.
Oh yeah.
In his days, and a little bit like Ensminger, who I think is a really bright mind. Lynn just got old when it became really posh and cool to be an offensive coordinator. But he was a winner. I mean, everywhere he went, he was a winner. And I think largely because, and this is sort of how our state, how Louisiana works, because Insminger's right under their nose, he's suddenly not good enough because he's been a tight ends coach for too long. Okay, that's the mentality of a lot of the fan base.
But would you agree or disagree?
The message board types.
When he came out, and this plays maybe into why you like him, or maybe it doesn't, but he came out and he said, I don't read the paper, I don't read the internet, I don't even know what Twitter is. It set a bizarre message to a lot of people, maybe outside of his zip code.
Well, neither he nor Orgeron have taken PR 101. Okay.
Well said.
How many times have you run into guys your age, Paul, away from work, and any of them said to you, "Gosh, I really love that last post you made on Instagram." Or
No,
it never happened.
No, I get it all the time. I get a call all the time. Say, "Can you talk about Nebraska?" I don't get it in my local paper.
I mean, it never happens. It's sort of a world unto itself. But the 18 to 34 crowd, which stimulates most of the talk that we see on the internet, and particularly on these message boards, they look at a guy like Insminger and think he's a fossil. That he's like, my God, this guy should be. Using his ARP, he should be using his ARP card.
What's his Snap account? Do you know?
Somewhere.
You know what his Snap is? He a Snap? Does he have Snapchat?
Yeah. So I think that's what it's about to some extent. But Steve Insminger, a little bit like Ed Orgeron, just because they're not public relations savvy, it doesn't mean that they suddenly fell off a turnip truck and don't know how to coach. Insminger knows offensive football. And I think now, because Ed's got really his guys, these are his core guys around him that he wants to be on this staff, he knows that if they don't win 9 games, I think his job's on the line. And I mean, in a lot of respects, not only is his job on the line, but other people's jobs are on the line. They need to be successful this year. And I think they've got a great chance to be that because Ed is going to be comfortable. Last year he wasn't. He actually dodged, I think, because the players loved him so much. He dodged some heavy bullets at midseason after that loss that they had because guys love playing for him. Now I think he's finally got the staff, and maybe the expectations being lowered to some extent, Paul, also plays well into his hands.
Well, I have to applaud you because I don't know if I've heard anyone speak this way, and I think it's critical because there is just such negativity associated with that program, Tim. This has been fascinating on that issue.
Well, it's been divisive there for such a long time, Paul, and it's really a shame that the Les thing happened. To me, I look at Les Miles, and as you know, I spent time with him last year a few times. He came into the booth with Spencer and me on Fox. May happen again this year. I don't know, but I think it may, and if it does, I'll welcome him back into the booth. Les Miles, to me, it was really a modern-day Charlie Mack. He just, couldn't beat Nick Saban any better than Charlie Mack could beat Bear Bryant. His record against Saban was far better than McClendon's. I think was 2-17 against Bryant. But Charlie Mack was a great coach. And until the Saban era began, McClendon's years were considered the golden era of LSU football. But the more things change, the more they really stay the same. LSU will always be a highly political situation, but it will always be a gold mine for talent. And the moment you think that they're kind of lying in the weeds and maybe they're a little bit of a walkover, that's when they come out and prove to you again that they are a wounded tiger, as they say, is something you don't want to deal with. And I think this may be one of those years. And maybe some of my thoughts here are positive because I am one that really thinks a lot of Orgeron. I think his story is a great one. I'd like to see him be successful. Just like I was really happy Lamar Jackson, Ozzie Newsome traded up to get so he could be picked in the first round last night. I was excited about that. It was worth staying up for the draft to see that happen. I like good stories, and I think the Orgeron story has a chance to be a great one.
Great stuff, as always, from Tim Brando. We've blown through one break. We're about to blow through another. But that happens when you have Tim Brando on the program. Tim, I hope you'll come back soon.
Anytime, Paul. Take care.
What a pleasure. Tim Brando joining us. We will be back with much, much more.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.